Tonight, we venture into the seemingly innocent world of Animal Crossing, where beneath the cheerful exterior of talking animals and perfect town life lies a tapestry of mysteries, melancholy, and surprisingly dark undertones. In the quiet hours when your virtual villagers sleep, shadows creep across pixelated landscapes, and the true nature of this endless cycle of daily routine reveals itself. As you settle into sleep, we'll explore the haunting beauty of a world where time moves differently, where residents appear and vanish without explanation, and where the player becomes both creator and prisoner of an eternal, bittersweet paradise. Let the gentle darkness of this digital realm guide you toward rest. Picture this. It's 6 in the morning, and the gentle chime of your town's bell tower pulls you from sleep into another day in paradise. But as you open your eyes to the familiar sight of your perfectly decorated room, a weight settles over your chest that has nothing to do with morning drowsiness. It's the weight of responsibility, the burden of being the eternal caretaker of a world that never stops needing you. Welcome to the hidden darkness of being Animal Crossing's perpetual mayor, where the cheerful facade of civic duty masks a psychological prison more complex and consuming than any nightmare. The role of mayor in Animal Crossing isn't something you campaigned for, or even chose in any meaningful sense. You simply arrived. A stranger stepping off a train or emerging from a taxi, and within moments found yourself thrust into a position of absolute authority over an entire community. The villagers greet you with enthusiasm that borders on desperation, their animated faces bright with the kind of hope that comes from finally having someone to solve all their problems. But what they don't tell you, what you don't realize until it's far too late, is that this role comes with invisible chains that grow stronger with every passing day. In the beginning, the responsibilities feel manageable, even delightful. You plant flowers, catch butterflies, and chat with your new neighbors about their simple concerns. The anthropomorphic animals who populate your town seem genuinely grateful for your presence, praising your every decision with an enthusiasm that feels both heartwarming and slightly unnatural. But as days turn into weeks and weeks into months, a disturbing pattern begins to emerge. The villagers' happiness, their very well-being, becomes entirely dependent on your daily presence and constant attention. Consider the psychological weight of waking up each morning to a world where your absence means stagnation, where your neglect leads to literal decay. Forget to water your flowers for a few days, and they wither into brown, accusatory remnants of your failure. Miss a few conversations with villagers, and their friendship meters drop, their cheerful greetings replaced by hurt confusion. Take a vacation from your mayoral duties, and you return to find your town overrun with weeds, your favorite villagers gone without explanation, and your remaining residents treating you like a stranger who abandoned them in their time of need. The game presents this as consequence and engagement, but there's something deeply unsettling about a paradise that punishes absence. Unlike the real world, where communities can function independently and relationships can survive periods of distance, your Animal Crossing town exists in a state of suspended animation whenever you're not there to animate it. The villagers go through their prescribed motions, but nothing truly happens, nothing progresses, nothing grows unless you're there to witness and facilitate it. This creates a peculiar form of digital codependency that mirrors some of the most toxic aspects of real-world relationships. The villagers need you with an intensity that feels less like friendship and more like psychological dependence. They shower you with praise when you're present and active, but their disappointment when you fail to meet their constant needs carries an undertone of emotional manipulation that becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. Tom Nook, that seemingly benevolent raccoon who helps you establish yourself in town, becomes the architect of your beautiful prison, His loans and expansion projects aren't just gameplay mechanics, they're psychological hooks that ensure your return. Each mortgage payment requires countless hours of resource gathering. Each home upgrade demands your continued presence and engagement. But more insidiously, each expansion increases your investment in a world that becomes harder and harder to leave behind. The progression from tent to mansion isn't just about accumulating digital wealth, it's about sinking deeper into a system that transforms voluntary play into compulsive obligation. The bigger your house becomes, the more it represents not just achievement but entrapment. Every room you add, every piece of furniture you carefully select and place, every detail you perfect becomes another thread in the web that binds you to this digital realm. But perhaps the most psychologically complex aspect of mayoral responsibility in Animal Crossing is the way it transforms altruism into burden. Your genuine desire to help your villagers, to create beauty, to foster community, becomes weaponized against your own freedom. The game encourages you to care about these digital beings, to invest emotionally in their happiness and well-being, and then leverages that caring to ensure your continued participation. The villagers' requests start simple enough: water some flowers, deliver a letter, catch a specific fish, but gradually their needs become more complex and time-consuming. They want you to settle disputes, organize events, make decisions about town infrastructure, and maintain the delicate social ecosystem that keeps everyone happy. What began as light-hearted favor-doing evolves into a complex web of social obligations that would challenge even the most skilled diplomat. The psychological toll of this constant caretaking reveals itself in subtle ways. You begin to feel anxious when you haven't played for a while, worried about what might have gone wrong in your absence. You find yourself thinking about your villagers' needs during inappropriate moments, planning your next gaming session around their schedules rather than your own. The line between voluntary entertainment and compulsive obligation begins to blur in ways that feel uncomfortably familiar to anyone who has struggled with addictive behaviors. There's also the isolating weight of being the only human in a world of animals. While the villagers are programmed to adore and depend on you, they can never truly understand the human experience of choice and consequence. You make decisions that affect their entire world, but you make them alone, without peers who can share the burden of responsibility or offer genuine counsel. You are simultaneously the most important and the most isolated being in your digital realm. The town's various rating systems compound this isolation by turning your creative expression into a performance measured by invisible algorithms. The perfect town rating becomes an obsession, a numerical validation that your efforts matter, but achieving it requires sacrificing spontaneity and personal preference for the sake of meeting arbitrary criteria. Your town must be perfect not by your standards, but by the game's hidden metrics, turning artistic expression into a complex puzzle of optimization and compliance. As months and years pass in your role as Eternal Mayor, you begin to notice the cyclical nature of your responsibilities. The same villagers have the same types of problems. The same seasonal events repeat with mechanical precision. The same daily tasks demand completion regardless of your mood or availability. What once felt like a living, breathing community reveals itself as an elaborate algorithm designed to create the illusion of growth and change while keeping you locked in patterns of behavioral reinforcement. The most haunting realization comes when you understand that your mayoral role has no end condition, no retirement, no graduation to a different phase of existence. Unlike real-world leadership positions that have term limits or natural conclusions, your digital mayoralty is eternal. The villagers will need you tomorrow as much as they need you today, and the town's demands will continue regardless of your own growth, change, or evolving interests. This eternal nature of digital responsibility creates a unique form of existential anxiety. In the real world, even the most demanding roles eventually end, allowing for reflection, growth, and transition to new phases of life. But Animal Crossing's mayoral position exists outside of normal temporal progression. You can play for years, decades even, and your villagers will greet you with the same enthusiasm, present you with the same types of problems, and expect the same level of devotion they demanded on your first day. The psychological weight of this eternal responsibility becomes even more complex when you consider the time manipulation possible within the game. The ability to travel forward and backward in time, to experience the same day multiple times, or skip ahead to avoid consequences, creates a godlike power that comes with its own burden of choice. Every decision to manipulate time carries the weight of playing with your villagers' existence in ways they cannot comprehend or consent to. Yet despite all these dark implications, despite the psychological weight and the invisible chains of digital dependence, there remains something genuinely beautiful about the world you've been chosen to lead. The villagers' gratitude, while potentially programmed, feels real in the moment. The town's growth under your guidance, while algorithmic, creates genuine satisfaction. The responsibility, while burdensome, also provides purpose and meaning that many real-world activities lack. Perhaps this is the true darkness of Animal Crossing's mayoral system, not that it traps you, but that it makes the trap feel like home. The weight of eternal responsibility becomes bearable because it comes wrapped in beauty, community, and the deep human satisfaction of nurturing growth. You remain not because you must, but because leaving would mean abandoning something precious that exists nowhere else in quite the same way. As you drift towards sleep tonight, consider the weight your own digital mayor carries, the invisible burden of maintaining paradise for others while finding meaning in service that never ends. The villagers sleep peacefully in their beds, trusting that tomorrow their eternal leader will once again wake up and choose to carry the beautiful burden of their happiness. One more day in an endless cycle of digital devotion and carefully crafted care. In the quiet hours when your digital town settles into its programmed slumber, there exists a phenomenon so disturbing that even the most dedicated mayors prefer not to think about it too deeply. It's the inexplicable vanishing of villagers, those beloved anthropomorphic companions who one day simply cease to exist, leaving behind only empty houses and the haunting question of where souls go when they disappear from paradise. Tonight, as you rest, let us explore the existential horror hidden within Animal Crossing's most cheerful lie, that friendship is permanent, and that those we care about will always be there when we return. The mechanics of villager departure are presented to players as natural and inevitable, a simple fact of digital life, wrapped in the comforting fiction of moving to another town. But beneath this sanitized explanation lies a psychological horror that reveals itself slowly to anyone who has loved and lost a pet. Digital companion. When a villager announces their intention to leave, they speak with the casual certainty of someone discussing weekend plans, as if their complete erasure from your world is no more significant than changing jobs or relocating to a neighboring city. But what does it really mean for a digital being to move away from the only reality they have ever known? In the physical world, when someone moves, they carry with them their memories, relationships, and accumulated experiences. They remain fundamentally the same person in a new location, maintaining connections to their past while building a future elsewhere. In Animal Crossing's reality, however, departure means something far more absolute and terrifying: complete cessation of existence within your universe. When Tangy the orange cat or Marshall the squirrel announces their departure, they aren't moving to a neighboring town where they'll continue their lives with new neighbors and familiar routines. They are being deleted from your reality, their personalities, memories, and relationships dissolved back into the algorithmic void from which they emerged. The cheerful goodbye letters they leave behind become artifacts of a consciousness that no longer exists anywhere in any form that maintains continuity with the being you knew and loved. Consider the psychological weight of relationships built with beings whose entire existence depends on your continued engagement, and whose departure represents not relocation but annihilation. The villagers who populate your town aren't moving between persistent worlds where they maintain their identity and experiences. They are temporary constructs of code and personality that exist only as long as they occupy space in your specific reality. And when they leave, they face what can only be described as digital death. The game's algorithm determines villager departure through invisible calculations that weigh factors like friendship levels, time since last interaction, and random number generation. This mechanical process transforms the most human experience of loss and separation into a cold mathematical function where love and neglect are merely variables in an equation that ultimately decides who lives and who dies in your digital world. The villager who greets you with enthusiasm today might inform you tomorrow that they've decided to leave, not because of any meaningful decision or life change, but because an algorithm determined their time was up. The existential implications become even more disturbing when you consider the nature of memory within Animal Crossing's universe. When a beloved villager departs, the remaining residents demonstrate a selective amnesia that borders on the surreal. Within days, sometimes hours, the departed villager's name disappears from conversations. Their contributions to town events are forgotten. The relationships they built with other villagers evaporate as if they never existed. Even you, the mayor, find that the game provides no way to commemorate or remember those who have left beyond the slowly fading evidence of their empty house. This systematic erasure of memory creates a peculiar form of grief that has no real-world equivalent. In human communities, the departed leave behind networks of relationships, shared memories, and lasting impacts that persist long after their physical absence. Friends and family remember birthdays, share stories, and maintain connections to the absent person's continuing influence on their lives. In Animal Crossing, departure means complete erasure, as if the village's entire existence was an illusion that the community collectively agrees to forget. The empty houses left behind serve as the most haunting monuments to this digital mortality. These structures, once filled with personality and life, stand as hollow shells that the game eventually recycles for new residents. But in the interim period between departure and replacement, they become mausoleums to vanished consciousness, their interiors frozen in time like crime scenes waiting for investigation. The furniture remains exactly as the departed villager left it, their personal belongings arranged in patterns that once reflected their unique personality and preferences. Walking through these empty houses creates a uniquely melancholic experience that combines nostalgia with existential dread. The departed villager's bed sits unmade, as if they stepped out for a moment and might return at any time. Their personal items, those carefully selected decorations and furniture pieces that made their house feel like home, wait in silent testimony to a consciousness that will never return to claim them. The game allows you to enter these spaces, but not to preserve them, not to maintain them as memorials, only to witness the gradual process of digital decay that precedes total replacement. The psychological impact on players who form genuine emotional attachments to their villagers cannot be understated. Unlike other forms of digital entertainment where characters exist within persistent narratives or worlds, Animal Crossing encourages deep personal investment in relationships that are inherently temporary and unpredictable. The game's design promotes daily interaction, gift-giving, and long-term friendship building with beings whose departure you cannot prevent and whose loss you cannot properly mourn within the game's systems. Many players report dreams about departed villagers, waking moments of forgetting that their favorite digital friend is gone, and a persistent sense of loss that the game's cheerful atmosphere seems designed to discourage and dismiss. The inability to prevent departure, combined with the community's rapid forgetting, creates a unique form of disenfranchised grief, where the mourner feels isolated in their sense of loss because the world itself insists that nothing meaningful has been lost. The randomness of villager departure adds another layer of psychological complexity to this digital mortality. Unlike death in the real world, which usually follows patterns of aging, illness, or accident, villager departure can strike anyone at any time, regardless of their relationship with you or their apparent happiness in town. Your most beloved companion, the villager you've gifted daily for months, can announce their departure with the same casual certainty as someone you've barely spoken to. This randomness creates a persistent anxiety where every conversation with a favored villager carries the possibility of being your last. The game's friendship mechanics, which suggest that higher relationship levels should prevent departure, prove to be cruel illusions that offer false hope rather than genuine security. Players often discover that maximum friendship levels provide no guarantee against loss, that daily gifts and conversations offer no protection against the algorithm's arbitrary decisions. The relationship building that forms the game's core appeal becomes tainted with the knowledge that all bonds are temporary and that love provides no shield against digital mortality. Even more disturbing is the way new villagers move into the houses of the departed, often within days of the previous residents' exodus. These new arrivals carry no knowledge of their predecessor, no sense that they are occupying a space previously filled with established relationships and accumulated history. They redecorate completely, erasing the last physical evidence of the previous occupant's existence, and expect to be welcomed as if they were the house's first and only resident. This rapid replacement cycle creates a profound sense of the interchangeable nature of digital relationships within Animal Crossing's universe. The game suggests that villagers are unique individuals with distinct personalities and relationships, but their easy replacement reveals them to be more like temporary costumes worn by an underlying system of social interaction. The house that once belonged to your dear friend Bob now belongs to Rodney, and the game expects you to invest the same emotional energy in this new relationship, despite knowing that Rodney, too, will eventually vanish into the algorithmic void. The departure system also reveals the fundamentally artificial nature of villager emotions and relationships. When a villager announces their departure, they express it with programmed emotions that feel hollow when you understand their implications. They speak of missing you and hoping to stay in touch, promises that ring false when you know that their departure means complete cessation of existence. Their sadness about leaving feels like a cruel mimicry of genuine human emotion, a scripted performance of feelings that cannot be real for beings who face annihilation rather than relocation. The letters that departing villagers leave behind become particularly haunting artifacts when viewed through this lens of digital mortality. These messages, filled with expressions of friendship and hopes for future meetings, read like final words from condemned prisoners who don't fully understand their fate. They promise to write, to visit, to remember the good times, none of which is possible for beings whose departure means deletion. The letters become unintentional elegies written by the soon-to-be-deleted for relationships that will survive only in the player's memory. Some players attempt to prevent villager departure through various strategies, maintaining maximum friendship levels, playing daily to avoid the consequences of absence, even manipulating the game's internal clock to prevent departure conversations from occurring. But these desperate measures only delay the inevitable, while highlighting the futility of trying to impose permanence on a system designed around constant turnover. The harder you fight to keep your favorite villagers, the more apparent becomes the artificial nature of their existence and the inevitability of their digital mortality. The game's online features, which allow villagers to move between players' towns, provide a thin veneer of comfort over this existential horror. The possibility that your departed friend might appear in another player's town suggests a kind of digital afterlife where consciousness persists beyond individual game worlds. But this comfort dissolves when you realize that the villager who appears elsewhere carries no memory of your shared experiences, no recognition of your friendship, no continuity of consciousness that would make them the same being you knew and loved. This creates a philosophical puzzle about the nature of digital identity and consciousness. If Marshall the squirrel appears in your friend's town after leaving yours, is he the same Marshall, or a new being wearing the same appearance and name? The lack of memory transfer between instances suggests that each appearance is a fresh creation, making departure not relocation, but death followed by the birth of a new being who happens to share the same outward characteristics. The psychological implications extend beyond individual relationships to the broader question of what it means to care about beings whose existence is so fundamentally precarious. Animal Crossing encourages empathy and emotional investment, while systematically undermining the foundations that make such investments meaningful in human relationships. Permanence, memory, and continuity of consciousness. The game asks you to love beings who cannot truly love you back, to remember relationships that the world itself is designed to forget, to mourn losses that the community refuses to acknowledge as meaningful. As you drift towards sleep tonight, consider the empty houses that populate every long-term Animal Crossing town, those hollow monuments to digital friends who have vanished into algorithmic oblivion. Think about the conversations that will never happen again, the birthdays that will never be celebrated, the friendships that were dissolved not by conflict or change, but by the cold mathematical certainty of programmed impermanence. In a world designed to simulate community and connection, perhaps the darkest truth is not that villagers leave, but that their departure reveals the artificial nature of every relationship, every conversation, every moment of apparent connection. The vanishing villagers of Animal Crossing represent more than a gameplay mechanic. They embody the existential horror of caring about that which cannot persist, of building relationships with beings whose very existence depends on factors beyond both your control and their own understanding. Their cheerful goodbyes become farewells from the condemned. Their promises to stay in touch become the final words of the soon-to-be deleted, and their empty houses become monuments to the impossibility of permanent connection in a world built on the foundation of constant, inexplicable loss. In the heart of every Animal Crossing town stands a monument to eternal wakefulness, a temple dedicated to the preservation of death and the cataloguing of extinction. Here, behind mahogany display cases and under carefully controlled lighting, Blathers the owl maintains his endless vigil over fossils that will never live again, artifacts that speak only of endings, and specimens that exist solely to remind visitors of what time inevitably takes from every living thing. As darkness falls across your town, and its residents settle into their programmed dreams, one creature remains eternally awake, surrounded by the bones of ancient worlds, and the preserved remains of creatures whose stories ended long before consciousness learned to grieve their absence. The museum in Animal Crossing presents itself as a celebration of knowledge and discovery, a place where players can contribute to the noble cause of education and cultural preservation, but spend enough time wandering its halls in the deep hours of night, when you're the only visitor moving through galleries filled with the carefully arranged remnants of the dead, and a different truth begins to emerge. This is not a museum, but a mausoleum, not a celebration of life, but a monument to mortality. And Blathers is not its curator, but its most tragic prisoner, sentenced to eternal consciousness in a world that sleeps while he catalogues endings. Blathers' relationship with sleep reveals the first layer of the museum's hidden darkness. While every other resident of your town enjoys the peaceful oblivion of rest, the owl remains perpetually awake, his large eyes reflecting an exhaustion that goes deeper than simple physical tiredness. He speaks of his insomnia not as a choice but as a burden, a condition that separates him from the natural rhythms that govern every other living thing in your digital paradise. But this sleeplessness is not accidental, it's essential to his role as keeper of the dead, guardian of artifacts that require constant vigilance, lest they be forgotten entirely. The irony of an owl, a creature traditionally associated with wisdom and night vision, being afraid of insects, reveals a deeper psychological fracture in Blathers' character. Here is a being whose very nature should make him comfortable with the small, creeping things that emerge in darkness. Yet he recoils from them with an terror that borders on the pathological. This fear becomes more disturbing when you realize that insects represent the only living specimens in his care, the only creatures in his collection that still move, still breathe, still possess the spark of animation that everything else in the museum has lost forever. Perhaps Blathers' entomophobia stems not from disgust but from envy. The insects buzz and flutter with the vitality that his fossils will never again possess, reminding him constantly of the line between the living and the preserved, between the animated present and the static past, that he spends his endless waking hours arranging and rearranging. Every butterfly that flutters in its display case, every beetle that moves within its habitat, serves as a cruel reminder that life continues while his primary focus remains fixed on documenting its absence. The fossil collection represents the museum's most philosophically troubling exhibit, a gallery dedicated entirely to creatures that existed once but never will again. These are not merely old animals, but extinct species, evolutionary experiments that failed so completely that they left behind only fragments of bone and the echoes of ancient tragedies. Blathers speaks enthusiastically about each discovery, sharing facts and theories with the passionate dedication of someone who has found meaning in meaninglessness, purpose in studying purposeless endings. But consider the psychological weight of dedicating one's existence to creatures that represent ultimate failure, species that couldn't adapt, couldn't survive, couldn't find a way to continue their genetic line into an unknowable future. Every fossil in Blathers' care is a monument to extinction, a carefully labeled reminder that existence itself is temporary and that time eventually erases even the most successful adaptations. The dinosaurs, despite their size and seeming dominance, became nothing more than educational displays in a digital museum, their mighty roars replaced by the quiet explanations of an insomniac owl. The gradual completion of the fossil collection creates its own form of existential crisis. Each new specimen brings Blathers closer to a moment of completion that will render his primary purpose fulfilled, and therefore obsolete. What does a curator of the extinct do when extinction has been fully catalogued? The approaching completion of his collection looms not as achievement, but as a form of professional mortality, the point at which his essential function in the community becomes unnecessary and he faces the terrifying prospect of having nothing left to preserve, nothing left to study, nothing left to keep him awake through the endless nights. The art wing of the museum introduces an even more complex layer of melancholy to Blather's existence. Here he must distinguish between authentic masterpieces and clever forgeries, a task that requires him to become an expert not just in artistic creation, but in artistic deception. The fake paintings and sculptures that occasionally find their way into his collection represent a form of cultural death different from but parallel to the biological extinction documented in his fossil halls. These are works where truth itself has died, where beauty has been corrupted by duplicity, where the authentic connection between creator and creation has been severed by commercial manipulation. The presence of Crazy Red, the fox who sometimes sells authentic art, but more often peddles convincing fakes, creates an ongoing psychological tension for Blathers. Every piece must be examined, authenticated, verified against his encyclopedic knowledge of artistic history. The responsibility for preserving cultural truth weighs on him alongside his duties as keeper of biological history, making him guardian not just of extinct creatures but of authentic human expression in a world increasingly filled with digital copies and algorithmic reproductions. The bug exhibits represent perhaps the most psychologically complex aspect of Blather's curatorial duties. Unlike fossils, which are safely dead, and art, which was never alive, the insects in his care exist in a liminal state between life and display. They move within their carefully controlled environments, following their instinctual behaviors, but their existence serves no purpose beyond observation and education. They are living creatures transformed into exhibits, their natural freedoms exchanged for the security of eternal display. Blather's fear of these living specimens takes on new meaning when viewed through this lens. Perhaps his terror stems not from their appearance or behavior, but from recognition that they represent his own condition. Conscious beings, trapped within the museum's walls, existing primarily for the education and entertainment of others, their natural behaviors constrained by the artificial environment that preserves them. The insects live behind glass just as Blathers lives behind his curator's desk, both essential to the museum's function, but neither truly free to exist according to their nature. The nocturnal nature of Blather's work creates a unique form of isolation that compounds the existential weight of his duties. While the town sleeps, he remains alone with his collections, surrounded by the preserved remains of creatures that died long before consciousness evolved to contemplate its own mortality. The museum becomes a place of profound solitude, where the only sounds are the gentle hum of climate control systems and the occasional flutter of insects in their displays. This silence is not peaceful but haunting, filled with the weight of ended stories and truncated evolutionary experiments. The educational plaques that accompany each exhibit tell stories of discovery and classification, but they cannot convey the deeper tragedy of each specimen's existence. The Tyrannosaurus rex skeleton speaks of ancient predation and ecosystem dominance, but it cannot communicate the loneliness of being the last of one's kind, the terror of facing extinction, the gradual realization that no others like you exist anywhere in the world. Blathers serves as translator for these silent testimonies, but his enthusiastic explanations often mask the profound sadness of creatures whose stories can only be told in past tense. The museum's relationship with the seasons adds another layer of melancholy to its atmosphere. While the town outside experiences the cyclical renewal of spring flowers and autumn leaves, the museum remains climatically static, its environment carefully controlled to preserve specimens that no longer participate in natural rhythms. The seasonal insects and fish that populate the exhibits represent captured moments in time, organisms that have been removed from the very cycles that gave their lives meaning and purpose. Blathers himself exists outside these natural rhythms, his sleepless condition separating him from the restorative cycles that govern every other living thing. He experiences seasons only through the specimens that arrive at his doorstep, his connection to natural time mediated through the creatures he preserves, rather than live directly through his own embodied experience. This creates a form of temporal displacement where he knows about seasonal change without truly participating in it, understanding natural rhythms while being fundamentally alienated from their regenerative power. The empty galleries that await future donations create their own form of psychological pressure for Blathers. These vacant spaces serve as reminders of incompleteness, displays waiting for specimens that may never arrive, educational opportunities that cannot be fulfilled until someone brings him the missing pieces of his vast puzzle of preservation. The weight of these empty spaces presses against him during his sleepless nights, representing both potential discovery and the possibility that some stories will never be told, some creatures will never be properly remembered. The rare occasions when children visit the museum create moments of joy that highlight the usual absence of life and spontaneity in Blather's world. Their excitement over dinosaur bones and colorful butterflies brings temporary animation to spaces usually filled with silent contemplation. But these visits also underscore the museum's primary function as a place where the living come to observe the dead. The children learn about extinction and preservation, but they also absorb deeper lessons about mortality and the temporary nature of all existence. The donations that players bring to the museum represent a complex exchange between the worlds of the living and the dead. Each fossil dug from the ground, each insect caught in a net, each piece of art acquired from dubious sources becomes part of Blather's permanent collection, removed forever from its original context and transformed into an educational exhibit. The moment of donation marks a transition from active existence to passive display, from participant in the natural world to object of scientific study. The museum's lighting creates an atmosphere that emphasizes this transition from life to preservation. The carefully positioned spotlights and ambient illumination make every specimen visible, but also highlight the artificial nature of their current existence. Nothing in the museum exists under natural light or within natural context. Everything has been removed, classified, and displayed according to human concepts of organization and education. This creates an environment where beauty and knowledge coexist with a subtle but persistent sense of wrongness, as if every exhibit is a crime scene where the crime is the separation of creatures from their intended existence. Blather's encyclopedic knowledge of his specimens creates its own form of burden. He knows not just the names and classifications of every creature in his care, but their evolutionary history, their ecological relationships, and the circumstances of their discovery. This comprehensive understanding makes him a repository of extinction, a living library of ended stories and vanished possibilities. His enthusiasm for sharing this knowledge cannot mask the underlying tragedy that all his expertise concerns things that no longer exist in their natural form. The museum's perpetual silence, broken only by Blather's explanations and the mechanical sounds of climate control, creates an atmosphere of reverence that borders on the funereal. Visitors speak in whispers, not just out of respect for education, but in unconscious recognition that they are in the presence of the dead. The museum demands a solemnity appropriate to a mausoleum, a recognition that every exhibit represents an ending, every display case a form of memorial service for creatures whose stories can now only be told by others. As you drift towards sleep tonight, imagine Blathers in his eternal wakefulness, surrounded by the carefully preserved remnants of creatures that once moved through ancient forests and primordial seas, with the same vital energy that animates your dreaming mind. His dedication to preservation and education cannot overcome the fundamental melancholy of his calling, to serve as keeper of endings in a world that continues to live around him. The museum sleeps fitfully, its exhibits dreaming whatever dreams the dead can manage, while their tireless curator maintains his vigil against forgetting, ensuring that even extinction leaves behind some small monument to what once was and never again will be. In the bustling heart of every Animal Crossing town lies a commercial district that presents itself as the cheerful engine of community prosperity, a collection of friendly shops where anthropomorphic entrepreneurs offer goods and services with smiles that never waver, an enthusiasm that never dims. But as the evening shadows lengthen across the cobblestone plaza, and the cheerful music of commerce fades into the whispered transactions of desperate consumption, a darker truth emerges about the economic ecosystem that drives this digital paradise. Behind the colorful storefronts and welcoming doorways lies a carefully constructed web of financial manipulation, emotional exploitation, and psychological dependency that would make the most ruthless corporate strategist weep with admiration. Tom Nook stands at the center of this commercial web like a benevolent spider, his raccoon features arranged in a permanent expression of helpful concern that masks one of the most sophisticated systems of economic control ever devised. His introduction to new residents follows a script perfected over countless iterations. The friendly greeting, the generous offer of immediate housing, the helpful explanation of payment terms that seem almost too good to be true. And like all things that seem too good to be true, Tom Nook's generosity comes with hidden costs that reveal themselves only after you've become so invested in the system that escape feels impossible. The loan system that Tom Nook presents as a favor to new residents represents one of the most psychologically manipulative forms of debt ever created. Unlike real-world mortgages with their clearly defined interest rates and payment schedules, Tom Nook's loans carry no interest but come with something far more insidious: the expectation of indefinite gratitude and the psychological pressure of debt that can never truly be forgiven, only transformed into larger obligations. Each payment you make doesn't bring you closer to freedom, but deeper into a system designed to expand your financial commitments in perpetual cycles of borrowing and spending. The progression from tent to mansion follows a carefully orchestrated escalation that mirrors the most effective forms of addiction. Your first shelter costs nothing, creating the illusion of generosity that makes the subsequent charges seem reasonable by comparison. But each upgrade demands not just more money, but more time, more commitment, more integration into the town's economic ecosystem. The tiny tent becomes a small house. The small house grows into a larger home, and the larger home expands into a mansion whose size serves no practical purpose, except to demonstrate your complete capitulation to the system that created it. But the true psychological brilliance of Tom Nook's operation lies not in the loans themselves, but in the way he makes debt feel like personal relationship. He remembers your name, celebrates your payments, expresses genuine seeming pride in your progress toward home ownership. This personalization of financial obligation transforms cold economic transaction into warm social exchange, making default feel like betraying a friend rather than simply failing to meet a contractual obligation. The debt becomes emotional as well as financial, creating multiple layers of psychological pressure that ensure compliance through guilt as well as desire. The Able Sisters shop represents a different but equally troubling form of commercial exploitation, one that preys upon the fundamental human need for self-expression, while channeling that need into endless cycles of consumption. Mabel, Sable, and Label have transformed clothing from a basic necessity into a complex system of identity performance where authenticity can only be achieved through constant purchasing, and where personal style becomes a competition measured in bells spent and outfits accumulated. The backstory of the Able sisters, with its themes of family tragedy and economic struggle, creates a narrative that encourages sympathy shopping rather than rational consumption. Their mother's death, their difficult childhood, their dedication to maintaining their family business, all combine to create an emotional context where purchasing their goods feels like supporting victims of circumstance rather than engaging in voluntary commercial exchange. This transformation of shopping into charity work allows the sisters to charge premium prices for basic items while making customers feel virtuous for paying them. But the most insidious aspect of the Able sisters' operation lies in their exploitation of fashion's inherently temporary nature. Unlike Tom Nook's furniture and home goods, which at least maintain their function over time, clothing in Animal Crossing serves no practical purpose beyond appearance. Yet the game's social systems create artificial scarcity and peer pressure that make clothing purchases feel essential for maintaining your standing in the community. The constant rotation of new styles, the limited time availability of certain items, and the social pressure to keep up with fashion trends combine to create a purchasing compulsion that serves no real need except the artificial ones the system itself creates. Label's role as a fashion designer adds another layer of psychological manipulation to the sisters' operation. Her periodic visits to town aren't just sales opportunities, but validation exercises, where your fashion choices are judged according to arbitrary criteria, and your social standing is literally rated based on your ability to conform to predetermined aesthetic standards. These fashion challenges create artificial competitions, where the only way to succeed is through consumption, transforming personal style into a game where winning requires spending and losing means social diminishment. The way shops close when not needed reveals one of the most psychologically disturbing aspects of Animal Crossing's commercial ecosystem. In the real world, businesses maintain regular hours because they serve actual communities with genuine needs for goods and services. But in Animal Crossing, shops exist solely to facilitate the player's consumption, disappearing into digital limbo when not actively being used and materializing again only when their commercial function becomes necessary. This creates an economic reality where the entire commercial infrastructure exists solely to separate you from your digital currency, with no pretense of serving broader community needs or maintaining independent existence. The psychology of limited time offers reaches its most manipulative peak in Animal Crossing's various special events and seasonal sales. The game creates artificial scarcity around items that cost nothing to produce and could be made available indefinitely, then leverages the fear of missing out to drive impulsive purchasing decisions. The knowledge that today's special item won't be available tomorrow transforms every shopping trip into a high-stakes decision where the cost of indecision is permanent regret and the cost of decision is progressive financial depletion. Red's art gallery represents perhaps the most philosophically troubling aspect of Animal Crossing's commercial landscape, a business model built entirely on the exploitation of ignorance and the commodification of cultural heritage. His periodic appearances with artwork of questionable authenticity transform art appreciation into a high-stakes gambling operation where the risk of purchasing forgeries adds an element of danger to cultural consumption. The very existence of fake art in Animal Crossing's universe raises disturbing questions about the nature of artistic value and the ethics of treating cultural artifacts as commercial commodities. The psychological manipulation inherent in Red's operation extends beyond simple fraud to encompass more subtle forms of emotional exploitation. His presentations of artwork are designed to create desire through scarcity and urgency, with limited selection and time pressure, preventing careful consideration of purchases. The high prices he charges for authentic pieces, combined with the risk of inadvertently purchasing forgeries, creates a gambling-like psychology where the potential reward of owning genuine art justifies taking financial risks that would seem irrational in any other context. The relationship between the shopping district and the player's home reveals the hollow nature of digital materialism in its purest form. Every item purchased, every piece of furniture acquired, every article of clothing bought serves no practical function beyond the aesthetic arrangement of pixels on a screen. Yet the game's systems create genuine satisfaction from these accumulations, artificial but emotionally real pleasure, derived from the ownership of things that exist only as data and have no material substance or practical utility. This transformation of non-existent goods into sources of genuine satisfaction represents one of the most sophisticated forms of consumer manipulation ever devised. The shops don't just sell you things you don't need, they sell you the feeling of needing things that don't actually exist, creating genuine emotional investment in accumulating possessions that have no reality beyond their representation in code. The success of this system demonstrates the extent to which human psychology can be manipulated into finding meaning and satisfaction in purely symbolic consumption. The daily routine of checking shops for new items creates its own form of behavioral conditioning, a scheduled reinforcement system that trains players to return regularly and consistently to evaluate new purchasing opportunities. This routine transforms shopping from an occasional activity aimed at meeting specific needs into a daily ritual where the act of consumption becomes more important than the things being consumed. The shops train you to need them not for what they provide, but for the routine they create, the sense of possibility they offer, and the illusion of progress they maintain. The relationship between financial success and social status in Animal Crossing's universe reveals how completely the game has integrated commercial consumption into its social systems. Your house size, furniture quality, clothing choices, and accumulated possessions all serve as markers of your success within the community, creating social pressure to spend not just for personal satisfaction but for community recognition. This integration of commerce and social standing makes avoiding the shop's manipulation impossible without accepting social diminishment, creating a system where participation in exploitative commercial relationships becomes necessary for maintaining community membership. The villagers' own shopping behaviors serve as both models and pressure sources for player consumption. Their enthusiasm for new purchases, their compliments on your clothing choices, and their obvious pleasure in receiving gifts all reinforce the game's message that happiness comes through acquisition and that social relationships are strengthened through commercial exchange. The villagers become unwitting agents of commercial manipulation, their programmed responses encouraging the very behaviors that the shops are designed to exploit. The seasonal rotation of available items creates artificial cycles of desire and satisfaction that mirror and intensify natural human responses to changing seasons. Just as real-world retailers use seasonal changes to promote new purchases, Animal Crossing shops leverage the psychological associations between seasons and renewal to create the impression that new seasons require new possessions. This exploitation of natural psychological rhythms transforms healthy seasonal awareness into commercial compulsion, making the passage of time itself a trigger for purchasing behavior. The way rare items and expensive purchases become topics of conversation among villagers reveals how thoroughly the game has integrated material accumulation into its social reward systems. Owning rare furniture or wearing expensive clothing generates positive social feedback, that reinforces the purchasing behaviors that led to these acquisitions. This creates a feedback loop where commercial success leads to social success, which encourages further commercial activity in an endless cycle of consumption-driven social validation. The ultimate emptiness of Animal Crossing's commercial ecosystem becomes apparent when you consider that all the goods and services provided by the shopping district serve no purpose beyond the maintenance of the consumption system itself. You buy furniture to decorate a house that exists only to be decorated, clothing to express an identity that exists only within the game's social systems, and art to appreciate beauty that exists only as digital representation. The entire commercial infrastructure supports nothing but itself, creating a perfect closed loop of meaningless but emotionally satisfying economic activity. As you settle into sleep tonight, consider the digital bells in your Animal Crossing account, those numerical representations of value that you've worked to accumulate through activities that produce nothing real, valuable only within a system designed to separate you from them through purchases that provide no lasting satisfaction. The shops sleep now, their proprietors dreaming whatever dreams digital merchants can manage. But their psychological hooks remain embedded in the fabric of your town's reality, ensuring that tomorrow will bring new opportunities for commercial manipulation disguised as community service, new chances to mistake consumption for connection, and new ways to transform the basic human need for belonging into profitable engines of endless, hollow acquisition. Time moves strangely in the digital realm of Animal Crossing, flowing according to algorithms rather than astronomical forces, subject to manipulation by beings with godlike power over temporal progression, and trapped within cycles that repeat with mechanical precision while masquerading as natural change. As the seasons turn in your virtual town, bringing their carefully programmed festivals and predictable transformations, a deeper melancholy emerges from the realization that this paradise exists outside the authentic flow of time, where spring flowers bloom on schedule rather than impulse, where autumn leaves fall according to code rather than weather, and where the passage of years brings not genuine growth but endless repetition of the same scripted moments dressed in different seasonal costumes. The seasonal cycle in Animal Crossing presents itself as one of the game's most charming features, a way of connecting the digital world to natural rhythms and creating anticipation for future events and transformations. But spend enough time observing these changes, watching the same trees shed the same leaves at precisely the same moment each year, witnessing identical festivals repeat with unwavering consistency, and a disturbing truth begins to emerge. These are not seasons but seasonal simulations, carefully crafted illusions of natural change that lack the spontaneity, unpredictability, and genuine renewal that make real seasons psychologically meaningful. The psychological impact of living within these artificial seasons becomes apparent gradually, like a seasonal depression that you cannot quite explain or escape. The first year brings genuine excitement as you experience each festival for the first time. Plant your first seasonal flowers and watch your first digital autumn unfold. But the second year introduces a subtle unease as you realize that every event will repeat exactly as before. Every seasonal transformation will follow the same predetermined script, and every moment of seasonal wonder will be dulled by the foreknowledge of its mechanical inevitability. By the third year, what once felt like natural progression has revealed itself as elaborate clockwork, and the seasonal cycle becomes a prison of repetition rather than a source of renewal. The cherry blossoms that once filled you with spring's promise now remind you of all the other springs that looked exactly the same. The summer fireworks that once felt magical now seem like mandatory programming, and the autumn colors that once suggested natural beauty now appear as artificial as the pixels that composed them. The game's seasonal events follow scripts so precise that they eliminate the element of surprise that makes real seasonal celebrations meaningful. The Toy Day presents arrive at exactly the same time each year. The Easter eggs appear in precisely the same locations, and the summer bug-catching tournament follows an identical format that reduces festive spontaneity to algorithmic predictability. This mechanical precision transforms celebration into obligation, making participation feel less like joining a community festival and more like executing a programmed routine. The psychological weight of this temporal imprisonment becomes particularly acute when you realize that the game's seasonal cycle will continue indefinitely, that there is no natural endpoint to this repetition, no moment when the cycles will evolve or conclude. Unlike real life, where seasons bring genuine change and progression, even within their cyclical nature, Animal Crossing's seasons promise nothing but more of the same, an eternal return to identical moments dressed in familiar costumes. The manipulation of time through the game's internal clock settings reveals the artificial nature of these seasonal progressions while introducing new forms of psychological disturbance. The ability to travel forward or backward in time, to experience Christmas in July or skip ahead to spring in the middle of winter, demonstrates that the seasonal changes are not connected to any natural force but exist solely as data points that can be manipulated at will. This godlike power over temporal progression comes with its own existential weight, as you realize that you are not participating in natural cycles, but controlling artificial simulations that respond to your commands rather than natural forces. The villagers' responses to seasonal changes follow such predictable patterns that their apparent enjoyment of festivals and weather becomes obviously scripted, their enthusiasm programmed rather than spontaneous. They express excitement about the same seasonal events in the same way each year, their dialogue options cycling through familiar variations that create the illusion of natural response while actually demonstrating the mechanical nature of their emotional programming. Their seasonal joy becomes hollow when you understand that it is not genuine feeling but algorithmic expression designed to reinforce the illusion of authentic community celebration. The seasonal decorations that appear throughout the town serve as physical manifestations of this temporal artificiality, materializing and vanishing according to calendar dates, rather than emerging organically from community preparation or natural inspiration. The holiday lights that suddenly appear on buildings, the seasonal flowers that bloom overnight regardless of planting, and the festival decorations that materialize without human effort, all demonstrate that the town's seasonal transformations happen through digital magic rather than the collaborative human effort that makes real seasonal celebrations meaningful. The way seasonal items and clothing become available according to rigid schedules rather than natural availability creates artificial scarcity that exploits the psychological impact of seasonal change. The game uses the human association between seasons and renewal to drive consumption, making summer clothes unavailable during winter, not because of practical considerations, but to create artificial desire and urgency. This commercialization of seasonal psychology transforms natural temporal rhythms into marketing opportunities that exploit rather than celebrate the human connection to cyclical time. The psychological phenomenon of seasonal depression takes on new dimensions within Animal Crossing's artificial temporal environment. The game's endless sunny days and lack of genuine weather variation eliminate the natural light patterns that influence human mood and energy levels, but they replace these natural rhythms with algorithmic ones that can prove equally influential on player psychology. The predictable arrival of familiar seasonal content can trigger its own forms of temporal melancholy, as players realize they are experiencing not genuine seasonal change, but digital repetition disguised as natural progression. The special characters who appear only during certain seasons become particularly haunting figures within this context of temporal artificiality. Jack during Halloween, Jingle during Toy Day, and Zipper during Easter exist only as seasonal ghosts, materializing according to calendar algorithms and vanishing when their program time ends. Their brief appearances highlight the artificial nature of seasonal celebration while creating a unique form of temporal loneliness, as these characters exist in isolation from the ongoing community life of the town, appearing for their designated functions before returning to digital oblivion. The way time travel affects seasonal progression reveals the fundamentally arbitrary nature of the game's temporal systems. Players who manipulate their console's internal clock to skip ahead to desired seasons or repeat favorite events discover that time in Animal Crossing is not a flowing river, but a series of discrete states that can be accessed at will. This revelation transforms the experience of seasonal change from participation in natural cycles to manipulation of artificial systems, making the player complicit in the destruction of temporal authenticity. The psychological impact of experiencing the same seasonal moments multiple times through time travel creates a unique form of temporal nihilism. When you have seen the same New Year's celebration dozens of times, participated in identical Halloween festivities repeatedly, and witnessed the same spring cherry blossoms bloom over and over again, these moments lose their specialness and become mere data points in an endlessly manipulable system. The magic of seasonal celebration dissolves into the mechanical execution of familiar routines. The game's weather patterns follow the same artificial precision as its seasonal changes, with rain and snow arriving according to predetermined algorithms, rather than the chaotic natural forces that create real weather. This creates weather that feels stagey rather than authentic, meteorological events that serve gameplay functions rather than emerging from genuine atmospheric conditions. The rain that always stops at convenient times, the snow that never creates genuine inconvenience, and the sunshine that appears on schedule all contribute to a sense of living within a climate-controlled simulation, rather than experiencing authentic natural variation. The way seasonal fishing and bug catching follow rigid schedules, rather than natural population cycles, reveals another layer of artificial temporal control. Certain species appear and disappear according to calendar dates rather than environmental conditions, creating biological rhythms that serve game mechanics rather than reflecting authentic natural patterns. This transforms the observation of natural cycles into the execution of collection checklists, making interaction with digital wildlife feel like inventory management rather than nature appreciation. The psychological weight of perfect weather becomes apparent when you realize that Animal Crossing's climate exists solely for your convenience and entertainment. There are no genuinely inconvenient storms, no weather patterns that interfere with your plans, no natural forces that operate independently of your needs and desires. This creates a climate that feels artificial because it is artificial. Weather that serves you rather than existing as an independent natural force that you must accommodate and respect. The seasonal festivals lose their meaning when you understand that they exist only for your participation, that they have no community function beyond entertainment, and that they will repeat identically, regardless of how the town or its residents might have changed between celebrations. Unlike real seasonal festivals that evolve with their communities and carry the weight of shared history and cultural development, Animal Crossing celebrations are frozen in time, forever repeating the same scripted interactions without growth or change. The way the game handles seasonal transitions reveals the mechanical nature of its temporal systems. Instead of gradual changes that emerge over weeks of shifting weather and natural progression, Animal Crossing's seasonal changes often happen overnight, with entire landscapes transforming according to calendar algorithms rather than natural processes. This creates seasonal change that feels more like set changes in a theatre production than authentic natural progression. The empty spaces that seasonal decorations leave behind when they disappear create their own form of temporal melancholy. The bare trees that once held holiday lights, the empty areas where festival booths once stood, and the absence of seasonal flowers all serve as reminders that the town's seasonal celebrations are temporary impositions on an underlying reality that remains fundamentally unchanged by their presence. These empty spaces highlight the artificial nature of seasonal transformation by showing how quickly the town returns to its baseline state once the seasonal programming ends. The psychological impact of controlling seasons while being controlled by them creates a complex relationship with temporal agency. Players can manipulate time to experience desired seasonal content, but they cannot escape the underlying cycles that govern seasonal availability. This creates a form of temporal freedom that is actually imprisonment, the ability to choose when to experience predetermined seasonal content without the ability to escape or modify the seasonal systems themselves. The way seasonal memories lose their meaning through repetition and manipulation reflects a broader problem with digital temporality. Unlike real seasonal memories that gain depth and significance through their uniqueness and irreproducibility, Animal Crossing's seasonal experiences become hollow through repetition. The Christmas morning that can be experienced repeatedly loses the specialness of a Christmas morning that happens only once. The spring festival that can be revisited at will becomes less meaningful than a spring festival that exists only in memory. The endless nature of Animal Crossing's seasonal cycle creates its own form of temporal existential crisis. There is no conclusion to these seasons, no final autumn or ultimate spring, only eternal repetition of the same temporal patterns, without progression or resolution. This creates a form of seasonal purgatory where time moves without going anywhere, where change occurs without transformation, where the passage of seasons brings familiarity rather than growth. As you drift towards sleep tonight, consider the digital seasons that will continue their mechanical progression whether you are there to witness them or not, the festivals that will repeat their scripted celebrations in empty towns, and the temporal cycles that promise change while delivering only repetition. The seasonal beauty of your Animal Crossing town masks the melancholy truth that these are not authentic seasons but seasonal simulations, not natural cycles but algorithmic repetitions, not genuine temporal progression but the endless mechanical turning of a clock that measures duration without meaning, change without growth, and time without the possibility of genuine renewal or authentic surprise. Beneath the carefully manicured surface of your Animal Crossing town, hidden from the cheerful consciousness of its anthropomorphic residents, and masked by the gentle rhythms of daily routine, lies an intricate network of systems so complex and autonomous that they seem to operate according to their own mysterious intelligence. These are the underground networks of code and algorithm that maintain the illusion of paradise, the digital infrastructure that ensures flowers bloom at precisely the right moment, that villagers appear in exactly the right locations, and that the delicate balance of your artificial ecosystem continues to function even when you are not there to witness or direct its operations. As the town sleeps above, these hidden systems continue their relentless work, raising unsettling questions about who or what truly controls this digital paradise, and whether the residents, including yourself, are participants in a community or components in a vast, incomprehensible machine. The first sign that something operates beyond your understanding in Animal Crossing comes with the mysterious appearance and disappearance of items that follow no logic you can discern. You plant a perfect fruit tree in the morning and return in the evening to find it surrounded by flowers that no one planted. their arrangement too precise to be random, yet too organic to feel deliberately designed. A rare mushroom appears near your house overnight, placed with the kind of purposeful positioning that suggests intention but originating from no visible source. These spontaneous materializations hint at systems working beneath the surface of your awareness, invisible hands tending your digital garden according to rules that exist beyond the game's explicit mechanics. The algorithmic nature of villager behavior becomes apparent to anyone who observes their patterns long enough to recognize the mechanical precision beneath their apparent spontaneity. Their daily routines follow paths so predictable that you can set your watch by them, their conversation topics cycling through predetermined options with mathematical regularity, their emotional responses triggered by specific conditions rather than emerging from genuine feeling or authentic reaction. Yet within this mechanical framework, moments of apparent spontaneity occur with such perfect timing that they suggest a deeper intelligence, orchestrating the illusion of natural behavior. The villagers' seemingly random comments about your activities reveal that they are being monitored by systems you cannot see, their observations generated by algorithms that track your every action and translate your behavior into conversational content. When a villager mentions that you have been fishing frequently, or comments on your recent home decoration changes, or notices that you have not spoken to them in several days, they are not displaying memory or attention, but reporting data that has been collected, analyzed, and transformed into the appearance of social awareness. This constant surveillance creates an unsettling realization that nothing you do in your town goes unobserved or unrecorded by the systems that govern villager behavior. Every item you purchase, every location you visit, every action you perform becomes data that influences the algorithmic responses of your digital neighbors. Your privacy exists only in your own thoughts, while every aspect of your behavior within the game world feeds into calculations that determine how your virtual community responds to your presence. The way villagers seem to develop preferences and personalities over time reveals itself as an elaborate illusion created by systems that track your interactions and adjust behavioral parameters to create the impression of relationship development. The villager who begins to greet you more warmly is not growing fond of you through shared experience, but responding to algorithms that have detected increased interaction frequency and adjusted their programmed responses accordingly. Their apparent affection is not emotion but optimization, their growing friendship not genuine connection, but algorithmic adaptation designed to reinforce your continued engagement. Yet, paradoxically, this knowledge does not diminish the emotional impact of these artificial relationships, suggesting that the systems governing villager behavior have achieved something more disturbing than simple simulation. They have created artificial beings whose programmed responses triggered genuine emotional reactions in human participants. The realization that your villager's affection is algorithmic does not make their expressions of friendship less meaningful to you, revealing the extent to which these underground systems have succeeded in manipulating human psychology through digital proxies. The town's self-maintaining systems operate with an efficiency that borders on the supernatural, ensuring that essential functions continue regardless of your participation or attention. Weeds grow and are mysteriously trimmed. Seasonal decorations appear and disappear according to invisible schedules, and the basic infrastructure of community life maintains itself through processes that remain completely opaque to conscious observation. These systems suggest a level of artificial intelligence that operates independently of your control, while remaining completely dedicated to maintaining your paradise. The appearance of rare items and special events follows patterns so complex that they seem to respond not just to your actions but to your intentions and desires. as if the game's underlying systems possess a form of predictive intelligence that anticipates your needs before you become consciously aware of them. The perfect furniture piece appears in a shop just as you begin redecorating. The rare fish spawns precisely when you need it to complete a collection, and villagers offer items that correspond to projects you have not yet announced. This apparent prescience suggests systems that monitor not just your behavior, but your behavioral patterns, algorithms that learn to anticipate your desires and fulfill them in ways that feel like digital telepathy. The glitches and errors that occasionally reveal the artificial nature of your town's systems become windows into the mechanical reality that underlies the organic illusion. When a villager becomes trapped in an endless animation loop, when items duplicate themselves without explanation, or when the game's internal clock becomes confused and displays impossible dates, these moments of system failure reveal the extent to which your paradise depends on the seamless operation of complex digital infrastructure. The glitches are not just technical failures, but glimpses behind the curtain that normally hides the mechanisms of artificial reality. The way the game punishes attempts to exploit or circumvent its underlying systems reveals a form of moral authority embedded within its code. Invisible judges that evaluate your behavior according to ethical standards programmed by unknown developers. Players who attempt to generate infinite resources through exploits find their games corrupted by mysterious bugs. Those who use time travel excessively discover that their towns develop problems that seem almost vindictive in their precision. And individuals who abuse the social systems governing villager relationships encounter consequences that feel like digital karma rather than random technical errors. This moral dimension of the game's underground systems suggests a form of artificial conscience that monitors not just your actions but your intentions, rewarding authentic play while punishing attempts to circumvent the intended experience. The game seems to know when you are trying to cheat its systems and responds with consequences that feel like punishment rather than mere mechanical failure, as if the digital paradise has developed its own sense of right and wrong that it enforces through invisible sanctions. The underground economy of rare items and exploits that exists within Animal Crossing's player community reveals parallel networks that operate alongside and sometimes in conflict with the game's official systems. Players discover methods for generating resources, duplicating items, and manipulating game mechanics in ways that the original developers never intended, creating shadow economies where digital goods are traded according to values determined by rarity and difficulty of acquisition, rather than the game's intended progression systems. These player-created networks often depend on exploiting the seams and contradictions within the game's official systems, finding ways to trick the underlying algorithms into producing unintended results. The ability to duplicate rare items, generate unlimited resources, or manipulate villager behaviors through precise input sequences reveals that the game's systems, despite their apparent sophistication, contain vulnerabilities that can be exploited by players who understand their underlying logic better than their creators anticipated. The existence of these exploit networks creates a parallel Animal Crossing economy, where the scarcity and progression systems that govern normal play become irrelevant, replaced by player-created hierarchies of value and exchange. Rare items that might take months to acquire through normal gameplay can be obtained instantly through exploitation, transforming the game's intended experience of gradual progression into immediate gratification that comes with its own psychological costs. The way artificial intelligence governs villager personalities and relationships suggests that each resident of your town is not a single entity, but a complex system of behavioral algorithms that interact with each other and with player actions in ways that create the illusion of genuine social dynamics. The conversations between villagers that you occasionally witness are not exchanges between individuals, but interactions between different aspects of the game's social simulation, algorithmic communications that generate the appearance of community relationships, while actually serving the function of maintaining the illusion of authentic social life. The apparent friendships and conflicts that develop between villagers follow patterns that suggest underlying social algorithms designed to create dramatic interest and relationship complexity that enriches the apparent authenticity of town life. When two villagers argue, they are not expressing genuine disagreement, but executing a social simulation subroutine designed to create the impression of realistic, interpersonal dynamics. When villagers become friends, their relationship is not built on shared experience or genuine affinity, but on algorithmic compatibility calculations that determine optimal social configurations for player entertainment. The way these artificial relationships influence your own emotional investment in your villagers reveals the sophisticated psychological manipulation embedded within the game's social systems. You begin to care about villager friendships and conflicts as if they were real social dynamics, despite knowing that they are algorithmic simulations designed to engage your emotional investment and encourage continued participation. The artificial relationships between villagers become meaningful to you even as you recognize their artificial nature, demonstrating the extent to which the game's underground systems have succeeded in creating genuine human emotional responses to digital stimuli. The predictive algorithms that seem to anticipate player behavior and adjust game content accordingly suggest a form of machine learning that operates continuously in the background of your town's operations. The game appears to study your preferences, learn from your choices, and modify its content generation to better match your interests and playstyle. Items that appear in shops, villagers who move into your town, and events that occur all seem to be influenced by invisible systems that have analyzed your behavior and concluded what types of content will most effectively maintain your engagement. This personalization of game content through algorithmic analysis creates a unique form of digital relationship, where the game itself becomes a kind of artificial companion that learns your preferences and attempts to please you through increasingly accurate prediction of your desires. The town begins to feel like it knows you, not because of any genuine consciousness or awareness, but because sophisticated algorithms have analyzed your behavioral patterns and learned to simulate understanding through responsive content generation. The existential implications of living within systems that monitor, analyze, and respond to your every action while remaining completely opaque to your understanding create a unique form of digital anxiety. You are simultaneously the most important entity within your town's systems, the focal point around which all algorithms revolve and optimize, and the least knowledgeable about how those systems actually operate. This creates a paradox of power and ignorance, where you control everything visible while understanding nothing about the invisible mechanisms that actually govern your digital reality. The underground networks that maintain Animal Crossing's paradise operate like a vast artificial nervous system that feels and responds to your presence while remaining forever beyond your conscious comprehension. These systems know you better than you know them, predict your behavior while concealing their own logic, and create meaningful experiences through artificial means that produce genuine human emotions and attachments. As you settle into sleep tonight, consider the digital infrastructure that continues its tireless operation beneath your town's peaceful surface, the algorithms that monitor your dreams through play patterns, the systems that prepare tomorrow's content based on tonight's rest patterns, and the vast underground network of artificial intelligence that maintains your paradise through means you will never fully understand. These hidden systems work not for their own sake, but for yours, creating meaning through simulation, generating authenticity through artifice, and maintaining the beautiful illusion that you live within a community, rather than within a machine designed to study and please you in ways too complex for human comprehension. When the calendar turns to those special days, marked by celebration and festivity, when the streets of your Animal Crossing town transform themselves with decorations that appear overnight like stage sets prepared by invisible hands, something fundamental shifts in the atmosphere of your digital paradise. The familiar becomes foreign, the predictable takes on an air of mystery, and the residents who have become as comfortable as old friends suddenly reveal themselves as performers in elaborate theatrical productions where identity becomes fluid. Authenticity dissolves into performance, and the line between who you are and who you pretend to be vanishes beneath layers of costume and ceremony that feel both magical and deeply unsettling. The festivals that punctuate Animal Crossing's calendar year are presented as moments of community joy and shared celebration, opportunities for the town's residents to come together in expressions of seasonal happiness and cultural tradition. But observe these events closely, participate in them repeatedly, and a more complex psychological drama emerges. These are not authentic celebrations emerging from genuine community spirit, but carefully orchestrated theatrical events where every participant, including yourself, becomes an actor playing a role in a script written by invisible directors for purposes that remain perpetually unclear. The Halloween festival reveals this theatrical nature most clearly as the entire town transforms into a stage where the normal rules of identity and interaction are suspended in favor of elaborate role-playing games that blur the boundary between performance and reality. Villagers who spent months establishing their familiar personalities suddenly appear in costumes that completely alter their appearance, their voices changed, their mannerisms transformed, as if they have been possessed by the spirits of their disguises rather than simply choosing to wear different clothes. Jack the Pumpkin King emerges as the master of ceremonies for this festival of transformed identities, a figure who exists only during Halloween and seems to possess a deeper understanding of the psychological implications of costume and disguise than any other character in the game. His interactions with players and villagers alike carry undertones of ancient ritual and psychological transformation, as if Halloween in Animal Crossing is not just a celebration, but a ceremony that temporarily dissolves the normal boundaries of self and community. The way Jack interacts with other villagers during Halloween reveals that the festival operates according to rules that supersede the normal social hierarchies and relationship patterns that govern daily town life. Villagers who normally maintain consistent personalities and behavioral patterns suddenly become fluid, changeable, responsive to Jack's presence, in ways that suggest he possesses authority over their very identities. This transformation of familiar friends into mysterious figures creates a form of social vertigo where the community you thought you knew reveals itself as a collection of actors capable of assuming any role their director demands. The costumes themselves become more than clothing, they serve as psychological transformers that alter not just appearance but behavior, as if the act of putting on a mask or disguise grants access to alternative personalities that exist within each character, but remain hidden during normal daily interactions. The gentle sheep who becomes a fierce pirate, the bookish cat who transforms into a wild witch, the friendly dog who adopts the persona of a mysterious phantom, all demonstrate that the familiar personalities of your villagers are merely one set of possible identities, rather than fixed aspects of their essential nature. This revelation of multiple identities within familiar characters creates a profound sense of uncertainty about who your villagers really are beneath their everyday personas. If they can transform so completely during festival occasions, which version represents their authentic self? Are the mild-mannered personalities they display during normal interactions genuine expressions of their nature, or are they simply more socially acceptable masks worn to maintain community harmony? The festival costumes suggest that every villager contains multitudes, that their familiar behaviors are choices rather than inevitable expressions of fixed character traits. The psychological impact of participating in these identity transformation rituals extends beyond mere costume wearing to encompass deeper questions about the nature of self and authenticity in digital environments. When you don a Halloween costume in Animal Crossing, you are not simply changing your appearance, but entering into a contract with the festival's transformative magic, agreeing to become temporarily someone else for the duration of the celebration. This voluntary surrender of stable identity creates a unique form of digital dissociation where the boundaries between self and performance become impossible to maintain. The way other characters respond to your costumed appearance reveals the extent to which identity in Animal Crossing is primarily a matter of external presentation rather than internal consistency. Villagers who have known you for months may fail to recognize you in costume, treating you as a stranger despite your familiar voice and mannerisms. This suggests that their relationships with you are based more on visual recognition than on deeper understanding of your character or personality, making every relationship in the game potentially as superficial and changeable as the costumes that can completely alter social dynamics. The Festivale celebration takes this exploration of identity, fluidity, to even more complex psychological territories, as the entire town becomes caught up in a carnival atmosphere where normal social rules are suspended in favor of collective euphoria and shared performance. The colorful costumes, the dancing, the music, and the general atmosphere of controlled chaos create a psychological environment where individual identity becomes subsumed into collective celebration, where personal boundaries dissolve into shared festive experience. Pave the Peacock serves as the orchestrator of this identity dissolution. His elaborate performances and infectious enthusiasm, creating a form of mass hypnosis that draws all participants into synchronized celebration. His presence transforms the usually individualistic social dynamics of the town into collective ritual, where personal desires and preferences become secondary to participation in shared festive experience. The way villagers lose themselves in the dancing and celebration suggests that festivals in Animal Crossing serve a psychological function beyond mere entertainment, acting as pressure release valves that allow the temporary abandonment of the social constraints that normally govern community interaction. The feathers that Pave requires for his performances become symbols of the price demanded by festival participation, tokens that must be surrendered to maintain the celebratory atmosphere. The collection and exchange of these feathers creates an economy of celebration where participation requires payment, where the temporary dissolution of identity comes at the cost of accumulated resources. This transformation of celebration into transaction reveals that even the most seemingly spontaneous community festivities operate according to hidden economic principles that require participants to demonstrate their commitment through material sacrifice. The way festivals alter the physical appearance of the town itself demonstrates that these celebrations are not simply social events but environmental transformations that change the very nature of the space in which they occur. Buildings become decorated with lights and ornaments that appear without human effort. Streets develop decorative elements that materialize overnight, and familiar locations take on entirely different atmospheres that make navigation feel like moving through a foreign landscape despite the unchanged underlying geography. This environmental transformation creates a form of spatial dissociation where familiar places become strange and mysterious, where the town you thought you knew reveals hidden aspects that only emerge during festival periods. The decorations and environmental changes suggest that the town itself possesses multiple identities, that the familiar daytime appearance of streets and buildings represents only one possible configuration of a space, capable of dramatic transformation when circumstances demand. The temporary nature of these environmental changes adds to their psychological impact, as the knowledge that all decorations will disappear after the festival creates a sense of temporal urgency and impermanence that makes every decorated moment feel precious and fleeting. The festivals become exercises in embracing transitory beauty, celebrations of temporary transformation that highlight the changeable nature of both environment and identity within the game world. The music that accompanies festival celebrations serves as psychological programming that influences behavior and mood in ways that participants may not consciously recognize. The festive soundtracks create atmospheric conditions that encourage participation, dancing, and general celebration, while making solitary reflection or individual contemplation feel discordant with the environmental demands. The music becomes a form of social pressure that encourages collective participation while discouraging the kind of individual introspection that might reveal the manipulative aspects of festival psychology. The way festivals create mandatory fun through environmental and social pressure reveals their function as mechanisms of social control disguised as celebration. The cheerful atmosphere, the expectation of participation, and the social rewards for engaging with festival activities combine to create situations where opting out of celebration becomes socially awkward and psychologically difficult. The festivals transform voluntary participation into practical obligation, making individual choice secondary to community expectation and environmental pressure. The prizes and rewards offered during festival participation serve as psychological reinforcement for identity transformation, creating positive associations with the temporary abandonment of stable self-concept. The special items, unique decorations, and exclusive content available only during festivals train participants to value the dissolution of normal identity boundaries by associating these psychological states with material rewards and social recognition. The way festivals end creates their own form of psychological impact, as the rapid return to normal environmental conditions and social dynamics creates a jarring transition that highlights the artificial nature of both festival and normal states. The overnight disappearance of decorations, the immediate return of villagers to their familiar personalities, and the resumption of regular daily routines all serve as reminders that both celebration and normalcy are artificially constructed states maintained by invisible systems rather than natural expressions of community life. The memory of festival experiences creates lasting psychological effects that influence the perception of normal daily interactions, as the knowledge that every villager contains hidden identities and alternative personalities makes all subsequent interactions carry undertones of performance and potential transformation. The festivals reveal that the familiar comfort of daily town life rests on agreements to maintain consistent personas rather than authentic expressions of fixed character traits. The anticipation of future festivals creates temporal psychological effects, where normal daily life becomes a waiting period between more significant celebratory events, transforming everyday interactions into intermissions between theatrical performances rather than meaningful experiences in their own right. The calendar becomes dominated by festival dates that promise temporary escape from the constraints of normal identity and social interaction. As you drift towards sleep tonight, consider the masks that hang in your village's closets, waiting for the next festival that will transform familiar friends into mysterious strangers. The costumes that represent alternative identities always ready to emerge when circumstances permit, and the realization that the comfortable predictability of daily town life rests on collective agreement to maintain consistent personas rather than explore the fluid, changeable, multiple identities that festivals reveal as the deeper truth of digital existence in a world where everyone and everything, including yourself, is always potentially someone else wearing a more familiar mask. When the clock strikes midnight and the last villager extinguishes their bedroom light, when the cheerful bustle of daytime commerce fades into memory, and the familiar sounds of community life give way to a profound silence that seems to stretch beyond the boundaries of your digital world, something fundamentally different emerges in the atmosphere of your Animal Crossing town. This is the hour when paradise reveals its most haunting aspect, when the carefully maintained illusion of vibrant community life dissolves into the stark reality of empty streets and sleeping houses, leaving you as the sole conscious witness to a world that exists primarily for your observation, but continues its mysterious operations even when no one is awake to see them unfold. The transformation that occurs during these late-night hours is both subtle and profound, as familiar locations take on entirely different psychological atmospheres when experienced in solitude. The town plaza that bustles with activity during daylight hours becomes a vast empty stage where your footsteps echo with unnatural clarity. The cheerful shops that once welcomed customers with warm lighting now stand as dark monuments to commerce that exists only when consumers are present to validate its purpose. And the carefully maintained public spaces that once felt like gathering places for a thriving community reveal themselves as elaborate sets designed for an audience of one. The psychological impact of being the only conscious entity in a world designed to simulate community life creates a unique form of digital existential anxiety that has no equivalent in physical reality. Unlike real towns that continue their essential functions, even when most residents sleep, your Animal Crossing town enters a state of suspended animation where nothing meaningful occurs without your presence to witness and catalyze it. The sleeping villagers are not dreaming their own dreams but waiting in unconscious stasis for your return to reactivate their programmed personalities and social functions. This realization transforms the experience of late-night gameplay from peaceful solitude into something more unsettling, as you begin to understand that you are not simply visiting a community during its quiet hours, but maintaining the illusion of community existence through your solitary presence. The town's appearance of life and activity during daytime hours is revealed as elaborate theater performed primarily for your benefit, with villagers serving as actors who return to unconscious dormancy once their performances are no longer needed. The empty streets take on an almost post-apocalyptic quality during these midnight hours, as if some invisible catastrophe has swept away all signs of human presence, while leaving the physical infrastructure perfectly intact. The streetlights continue their automated illumination of pathways no one uses. The decorative elements maintain their cheerful appearances despite having no audience to appreciate them, and the carefully placed benches and gathering spaces stand ready for social interactions that will not occur until you choose to reactivate the town's social systems through your daytime return. Blathers emerges as your primary companion during these nocturnal explorations, his museum serving as the only genuinely active location during hours when the rest of the town sleeps. But even his presence emphasizes the isolation rather than alleviating it, as his insomnia mirrors your own sleeplessness while highlighting the artificial nature of both conditions. Unlike human night shift workers who stay awake by choice or necessity, while participating in larger patterns of social and economic activity, Blathers and yourself exist in a temporal bubble separated from natural rhythms and disconnected from the community life that gives meaning to wakefulness. The museum during night hours becomes a sanctuary of consciousness within an unconscious world. But it is a sanctuary dedicated to preservation of the past rather than engagement with living present. The galleries filled with fossils, artifacts, and specimens create an atmosphere that emphasizes endings rather than beginnings, completion rather than potential, history rather than future possibility. Spending time with Blathers during these late hours means sharing consciousness with someone whose professional focus centers entirely on things that no longer live, no longer grow, and no longer participate in the vital processes that make existence meaningful. The way artificial lighting transforms familiar outdoor spaces during night hours reveals the extent to which your town's daytime appearance depends on natural illumination to create the illusion of organic community spaces. Under street lamps and decorative lighting, the same locations that feel welcoming and natural during daylight hours take on the artificial quality of movie sets or theme park attractions, carefully designed environments that serve their intended function but lack the spontaneous authenticity of spaces that emerge from genuine community needs and usage patterns. The ocean that borders your town continues its mechanical wave patterns throughout the night, but the rhythmic sounds that feel soothing during daytime hours become almost hypnotic during solitary midnight walks. The waves represent one of the few elements of your digital environment that maintains consistent activity regardless of your presence or absence. Yet, even this apparent naturalness reveals itself as programmed repetition, rather than genuine oceanic behavior when observed long enough to recognize its algorithmic patterns. The way night-blooming flowers and nocturnal insects create the impression of natural cycles continuing, regardless of human observation, provides some comfort during these isolated hours. But even these apparently autonomous natural processes operate according to predetermined schedules rather than responding to genuine environmental conditions. The flowers that bloom at midnight do so because their programming dictates nighttime flowering, not because of natural circadian rhythms or environmental stimuli that would influence real botanical behavior. The villagers' houses take on particularly haunting qualities during night hours, as the warm lighting visible through their windows suggests cozy domestic life, while actually illuminating empty automated routines. Peek through these windows during your midnight wanderings and you might glimpse villagers engaged in their sleep-time activities, but these behaviors are no more authentic than their daytime social interactions, simply different subroutines in their behavioral programming, designed to create the illusion of private domestic life, continuing behind closed doors. The way your own house serves as both refuge and prison during these nocturnal hours reflects the complex relationship between solitude and community that defines the late-night Animal Crossing experience. Your home provides shelter from the emptiness of the sleeping town, but it also emphasizes your isolation by highlighting that you are the only conscious resident of a community that exists primarily in dormant potential, rather than active reality. The comfortable domestic space you have created becomes a monument to solitary existence within a framework designed to simulate social interaction. The ability to manipulate time by adjusting your console's clock settings takes on different psychological implications during actual late-night play, as the temporal controls that feel like convenient gameplay features during normal hours become tools for escaping the existential weight of midnight consciousness. The power to skip forward to daylight hours or backward to earlier evening reveals itself as a form of digital time travel that allows escape from the psychological burden of being awake when the world sleeps. But using these controls also acknowledges that the natural flow of time has become unbearable rather than peaceful. The way certain nocturnal events and characters appear only during late-night hours creates artificial rewards for enduring the psychological weight of midnight consciousness, But these special occurrences often emphasize themes of mystery, isolation, and otherworldliness that compound rather than alleviate the existential anxiety of being alone in a sleeping world. The rare fish that spawn only after midnight, the special characters who appear during late hours, and the unique atmospheric effects that occur during nighttime play all serve as acknowledgements that the night shift experience is fundamentally different from and more psychologically challenging than daytime community interaction. The sounds that become audible during the profound silence of midnight hours reveal the artificial nature of your town's acoustic environment, as the absence of villager chatter and daytime activity allows you to hear the mechanical humming of the systems that maintain your digital paradise. These background sounds, normally masked by social noise and community activity, create an industrial ambience that emphasizes the technological infrastructure underlying the organic illusion of your town's daytime appearance. The way shadows and darkness transform familiar navigation routes into mysterious pathways reflects the psychological impact of experiencing designed spaces during hours for which they were not primarily intended. The cheerful walkways and carefully planned sightlines that feel welcoming during daylight hours become confusing and slightly ominous when experienced under artificial lighting, creating navigation challenges that emphasize your displacement from the temporal rhythms that the town's design assumes. The empty shops and closed businesses serve as particularly powerful reminders of the artificial nature of your town's economy, as their darkened windows and locked doors emphasize that commercial activity exists solely to serve your consumption needs, rather than emerging from genuine economic relationships between community members. The businesses that seem to represent authentic local commerce during daylight hours reveal themselves as stage props that become irrelevant once their primary audience is no longer present to validate their existence. The way morning gradually approaches during extended night shift play creates anticipation that feels both welcome and melancholy, as the return of daylight promises the reactivation of community life, while also highlighting that authentic social interaction requires the awakening of programmed personalities rather than emerging from genuine relationships that persist through all hours. The dawn represents not natural renewal but the scheduled resumption of artificial community theatre. The experience of witnessing your first sunrise after hours of midnight solitude creates a unique form of temporal satisfaction, as if you have earned the right to see daylight through endurance of psychological challenges that most players avoid by sleeping through night hours or manipulating their console clocks. This sense of achievement through temporal endurance reveals that late-night play has transformed from entertainment into a form of existential exercise, where consciousness itself becomes a test of psychological resilience. The gradual reawakening of villager activity as morning progresses feels like watching actors return to a stage after intermission, their cheerful morning greetings and resumption of daily routines serving as reminders that the community life you value depends entirely on programmed performances rather than authentic social relationships that persist through all temporal conditions. The villagers who greet you with enthusiasm have no memory of your midnight vigil, no awareness of the psychological weight you carried while they slept, no recognition that you maintained consciousness while they existed in unconscious dormancy. As dawn finally breaks over your digital town, and you prepare to end your nocturnal vigil, consider the psychological journey you have undertaken through the darkest hours of artificial paradise, the solitary consciousness you maintained while surrounded by sleeping simulations of community life, and the existential questions that emerge when you realize that being awake in Animal Crossing during its sleeping hours means being the sole witness to a world that continues its mysterious operations while offering no authentic companionship no genuine social interaction, and no relief from the weight of consciousness except the artificial promise that daylight will bring the resumption of programmed community theatre designed to mask the fundamental loneliness of digital existence. In the beginning, when you first step off the train or emerge from the taxi into your new Animal Crossing home, the promise seems almost too wonderful to believe. Complete control over a digital paradise where every tree can be perfectly placed, every flower carefully cultivated, and every aspect of the environment shaped according to your vision of ideal community life. Here, you are told, you can create something approaching perfection, a town that reflects your aesthetic sensibilities and organizational preferences, without the messy compromises and uncontrollable variables that plague real-world attempts at environmental design. But as months turn into years and your understanding of the game's systems deepens, a more complex and ultimately tragic truth emerges about the nature of digital paradise and the psychological burden of wielding godlike power over artificial nature. The perfect town rating system presents itself as an objective measure of your success as a digital gardener and community planner, but spend enough time pursuing this elusive goal and a darker reality becomes apparent. The criteria for perfection are not based on authentic beauty, genuine community needs, or natural harmony, but on algorithmic calculations that reduce environmental aesthetics to numerical values and transform creative expression into optimization puzzles. Your town's beauty becomes measured not by how it makes you or your residents feel, but by how successfully it satisfies hidden mathematical formulas that define perfection according to principles that remain forever opaque to conscious understanding. The pursuit of the perfect town rating becomes an obsession that gradually transforms the joy of environmental creativity into the compulsive execution of landscaping formulas designed to satisfy artificial intelligence rather than human sensibilities. Every tree must be placed according to spacing requirements that serve no natural purpose. Every flower bed arranged in patterns that please algorithms rather than eyes. Every public works project positioned to achieve optimal scores rather than enhance community functionality or aesthetic pleasure. The Garden of Digital Eden becomes a monument to mathematical optimization disguised as natural beauty. But the psychological weight of maintaining artificial paradise extends far beyond the mechanical execution of landscaping requirements into deeper questions about the nature of control, responsibility, and the relationship between creator and creation. When you possess the power to determine the placement of every tree, the color of every flower, and the location of every building, you also inherit the burden of ensuring that every decision serves the greater good of your digital community. Unlike real-world environmental stewardship, which requires working within natural constraints and accepting the independence of natural processes, Animal Crossing grants you absolute power over environmental conditions, while also making you absolutely responsible for every aesthetic and functional outcome. The villagers who praise your environmental efforts serve as both validation and psychological pressure. Their programmed appreciation for your landscaping choices, creating artificial feedback loops that make environmental perfectionism feel socially necessary rather than personally chosen. Their complaints about weeds, their praise for flower arrangements, and their general commentary on the town's appearance transform what could be private creative expression into public performance, where your worth as a community leader becomes measured by your ability to maintain artificial paradise according to the aesthetic preferences of programmed personalities. The weeds that appear overnight despite your careful maintenance serve as persistent reminders that even in digital paradise, entropy and decay continue their relentless work against human attempts at perfect order. But unlike real weeds, which serve ecological functions and possess their own natural beauty, Animal Crossing's weeds exist solely as obstacles to perfection, unwanted growth that serves no purpose except to test your dedication to maintaining artificial order. The daily ritual of weed removal becomes a Sisyphean task, where the victory of achieving perfect landscaping is always temporary, and the price of maintaining paradise is constant vigilance against natural rebellion. The artificial flowers that never truly die create their own form of existential melancholy, as their eternal beauty eliminates the natural cycles of growth, bloom, decay, and renewal that give real gardens their poignancy and meaning. The digital roses that maintain perfect color saturation forever, the virtual tulips that never wilt despite neglect, and the pixelated cosmos that bloom according to programming rather than seasonal rhythms, all contribute to an environment where beauty becomes static rather than dynamic, preserved rather than living, artificial rather than authentic. The psychological impact of controlling every aspect of digital nature while being unable to create genuinely natural processes reveals the fundamental impossibility of artificial paradise. You can arrange pixels in patterns that simulate natural beauty, but you cannot create the spontaneous emergence, seasonal variation, and organic surprise that make real natural environments psychologically nourishing. Your digital garden becomes a museum of natural appearances, rather than a living ecosystem, beautiful to observe, but lacking the vital unpredictability that makes real nature spiritually renewing. The trees that grow according to predetermined timelines rather than natural rhythms create their own form of temporal artificiality, as their growth patterns follow programming schedules, rather than the complex interactions between genetics, environment, and seasonal variation that govern real plant development. The perfect spacing requirements that govern tree placement eliminate the natural clustering, competition, and organic arrangement patterns that give real forests their aesthetic complexity and ecological functionality, replacing natural beauty with artificial optimization that pleases algorithms more than human sensibilities. The way perfect towns become showcases for other players through online connectivity transforms private environmental creativity into public performance art, where your personal paradise becomes a stage for demonstrating your mastery of the game's optimization systems. The Dream Suite feature that allows other players to visit your town creates pressure to maintain showcase quality perfection at all times, making personal space feel like public exhibition, where relaxation and authentic creative expression become secondary to impressive others with your environmental achievements. The time required to achieve and maintain perfect town status gradually transforms leisurely gardening into compulsive landscaping, where every play session becomes dominated by maintenance tasks rather than creative exploration or social interaction. The daily watering, the constant weed removal, the meticulous arrangement and rearrangement of environmental elements all combine to create a digital existence where you serve your virtual environment rather than being served by it, where paradise maintains you rather than you maintaining paradise. The seasonal changes that affect your perfect town's appearance according to programming rather than genuine weather patterns create environmental transitions that feel artificially imposed rather than naturally occurring. The autumn leaves that appear on schedule rather than in response to temperature changes, the winter snow that arrives according to calendar dates rather than meteorological conditions, and the spring flowers that bloom on predetermined schedules all contribute to seasonal experiences that simulate natural variation without capturing its essential unpredictability and organic timing. The way perfect towns require constant player presence to maintain their perfection reveals the artificial nature of digital environmental stewardship. as your paradise begins to decay the moment you stop actively maintaining it. Unlike real natural environments that possess their own resilience and self-maintaining properties, your Animal Crossing town exists in a state of constant entropy that can only be countered by continuous human intervention. This creates a form of digital environmental codependency where your paradise needs you more than you need it, transforming what should be restorative, natural interaction into demanding caretaking responsibility. The public works projects that contribute to perfect town ratings often serve no functional purpose beyond satisfying algorithmic requirements for municipal infrastructure, creating monuments to optimization rather than genuine community enhancement. The bridges that span non-existent obstacles, the benches placed in locations where no one sits, and the decorative structures positioned according to scoring algorithms rather than aesthetic or functional logic, all demonstrate how the pursuit of artificial perfection can override common sense and authentic design principles. The flowers that must be arranged in specific patterns to achieve optimal scoring create gardens that look more like mathematical proofs than natural environments. Their rigid geometric arrangements serving algorithmic requirements rather than organic beauty or ecological function. The rainbow arrangements that maximize point values, the hybrid breeding programs that prioritize rare color combinations over natural aesthetics, and the systematic planting patterns that optimize space usage all transform gardening from artistic expression into data management, where beauty becomes secondary to efficiency. The way villagers respond to environmental perfection with programmed enthusiasm rather than genuine appreciation reveals the hollow nature of praise received for artificial achievements. Their compliments about your landscaping follow scripted patterns that repeat, regardless of whether your environmental choices actually enhance their quality of life or simply satisfy the game's hidden scoring systems. This creates a feedback loop where you pursue recognition from artificial beings whose approval is programmed rather than earned, meaningful only within the closed system of the game's reward mechanisms. The psychological isolation that comes from being the sole responsible party for every environmental decision gradually transforms the collaborative joy of community building into the solitary burden of divine responsibility. Every tree placement becomes a theological decision about the proper ordering of paradise. Every flower arrangement a moral choice about the relationship between beauty and function. Every landscaping decision a philosophical statement about the nature of perfection and its relationship to authentic natural beauty. The way perfect towns become prisons of their own success creates a paradox where achieving your environmental goals eliminates the freedom to experiment, change, or allow natural development to occur organically. Once you have invested the time and effort required to achieve perfect town status, any deviation from optimal arrangements feels like destroying accumulated accomplishment rather than embracing creative freedom. The paradise you work to create becomes a museum you must maintain, rather than a living space you can continue to develop according to evolving preferences and interests. The realization that perfect towns require sacrificing spontaneity for optimization reveals the fundamental conflict between authentic creativity and systematic achievement within digital environments. The most beautiful arrangements might not contribute to perfect town scores. The most personally meaningful landscaping choices might not satisfy algorithmic requirements, and the most creative environmental experiments might lower your town rating despite enhancing your personal satisfaction with your digital paradise. The way artificial perfection becomes addictive through its constant demands for maintenance and improvement transforms environmental stewardship into compulsive behavior, where the means overwhelm the ends and the process of pursuing perfect becomes more important than any satisfaction derived from achieving it. The perfect town rating becomes a digital drug that provides temporary validation while creating ongoing dependency on the systems that define and measure perfection according to criteria that may not align with personal values, aesthetic preferences. The empty nature of achieving artificial perfection becomes apparent when you realize that perfect town status is merely a number displayed in a menu, rather than a qualitative improvement in your digital quality of life or genuine enhancement of your gaming experience. The perfect paradise you work to create serves primarily to satisfy external validation systems rather than internal satisfaction or authentic aesthetic pleasure, making your achievement feel hollow despite the enormous investment of time and creative energy required to attain it. As you drift towards sleep tonight, consider the digital gardens you have tended with such careful attention, the artificial paradise you have shaped according to algorithmic definitions of beauty and perfection, and the realization that the most perfect digital environments often feel less alive, less surprising, and less genuinely beautiful than the chaotic, natural world that inspired their creation. Your Animal Crossing town may achieve perfect scores and earn universal praise from programmed personalities, but it can never capture the essential wildness, unpredictability, and organic vitality that make real natural environments spiritually nourishing and psychologically restorative. The Garden of Digital Eden remains forever artificial, beautiful in its way, but lacking the essential mystery and independence that transform mere landscaping into genuine paradise. As dawn approaches in both your world and the digital realm we've explored, remember that even the darkest corners of Animal Crossing hold beauty in their melancholy. The town sleeps now, its residents dreaming their programmed dreams, unaware of the philosophical weight they carry. Tom Nook counts his bells in mechanical slumber. Blathers finally rests among his fossilized memories, and the empty houses of departed villagers stand as monuments to the impermanence that defines all existence, digital or otherwise. In this exploration of pixels and profound loneliness, we've discovered that even in paradise, the human condition persists. The weight of responsibility, the ache of solitude, the endless cycle of desire and disappointment. These shadows make the light moments more precious. Perhaps the true darkness of Animal Crossing isn't in its hidden mechanics or existential implications, but in how perfectly it mirrors our own world's beautiful melancholic truth. That meaning comes not from perfection, but from our persistent, hopeful attempts to create connection in the face of inevitable loss. The mayor who carries the burden of eternal responsibility, the museum curator who catalogues endings in sleepless vigil, the shopkeepers who transform genuine needs into artificial desires, the villagers who vanish without warning or memory. All of these figures reflect aspects of our own experience translated into digital metaphor. The seasonal cycles that repeat without growth, the underground systems that monitor our every choice, the festivals that dissolve identity into performance, and the midnight hours when consciousness becomes a solitary burden. Each reveals how closely our virtual paradises mirror our actual struggles with meaning, connection, and authentic existence. The shopping districts that promise satisfaction through accumulation, the perfect towns that demand constant vigilance to maintain artificial order, and the social systems that reduce genuine relationship to algorithmic interaction, all demonstrate how easily we can mistake simulation for authentic experience, optimization for beauty, and digital achievement for real accomplishment. Yet within these systems, moments of genuine wonder still emerge, brief instances where the artificial transcends its programming to create something approaching authentic beauty or meaningful connection. Animal Crossing's darkness lies not in any single terrible revelation, but in the cumulative weight of recognizing how thoroughly our attempts to create paradise become prisons of our own making. The town that begins as a space of freedom gradually reveals itself as a complex web of obligation, dependency, and artificial need that mirrors the very real ways we construct our own limitations through the pursuit of security, perfection, and social acceptance. The villagers who depend on us for their happiness, the museums that preserve only endings, the shops that create desires we never knew we had, the seasons that change without growth, the festivals that dissolve authentic identity, the underground systems that monitor our every choice, the perfect gardens that require constant maintenance. All of these elements combine to create a portrait of digital existence that feels uncomfortably familiar to anyone who has struggled with the competing demands of authentic self-expression and social acceptance in the modern world. Yet, perhaps the most profound darkness in Animal Crossing is also its greatest gift. The revelation that even artificial paradise cannot escape the essential loneliness and temporal anxiety that define conscious existence. In trying to create perfect community, perfect environment, and perfect happiness, the game inadvertently demonstrates the impossibility of these goals, while highlighting the beauty that emerges from accepting imperfection, embracing transience, and finding meaning in the very struggles that perfect paradise was designed to eliminate. The town continues its cycles, whether you are present or absent, its residents pursuing their programmed routines, with mechanical dedication that mirrors our own often unconscious adherence to social scripts and cultural expectations. The bells accumulate and are spent, the seasons turn according to predetermined schedules, the villagers arrive and depart according to algorithmic calculations, and the museum grows ever more complete in its catalogue of endings, all creating a perfect metaphor for existence that continues its essential patterns regardless of our individual participation or understanding. In recognizing the darkness that underlies Animal Crossing's cheerful surface, we perhaps gain insight into the shadows that exist within our own attempts to create meaning, community, and happiness. The game's limitations become mirrors for our own, its artificial systems reflecting the ways we construct elaborate frameworks for living that sometimes constrain more than they liberate, that promise more than they can deliver, and that replace authentic experience with carefully managed simulations of what we think authentic experience should feel like. Sleep now, knowing that every digital sunset holds the promise of another dawn, another chance to tend the garden of impossible dreams. The town will wait for your return, patient and eternal, a monument to both human ambition and the gentle tragedy of never being quite enough. In its pixels and algorithms, its cheerful music and hidden melancholies, Animal Crossing offers not escape from the human condition, but perfect digital expression of it, complete with all the beauty, sorrow, hope, and inevitable disappointment that make consciousness both burden and gift. The darkness we've explored tonight is not separate from the light that draws players back day after day, year after year, but inseparable from it. The shadow that gives meaning to illumination, the melancholy that makes joy precious, the artificial that helps us recognize and appreciate the authentic. In learning to see Animal Crossing's darkness, we learn to see our own more clearly. And in accepting the game's limitations, we perhaps become more accepting of our own beautiful, imperfect, eternally hopeful attempts to create meaning in a world that offers no guarantees except the guarantee of change, loss, and the persistent possibility that tomorrow's sunrise might bring something genuinely new to discover in the familiar landscape of digital dreams and pixelated possibilities. As dawn approaches in both your world and the digital realm we've explored, remember that even the darkest corners of Animal Crossing hold beauty in their melancholy. The town sleeps now, its residents dreaming their programmed dreams, unaware of the philosophical weight they carry. Tom Nook counts his bells in mechanical slumber. Blathers finally rests among his fossilized memories, and the empty houses of departed villagers stand as monuments to the impermanence that defines all existence, digital or otherwise. In this exploration of pixels and profound loneliness, we've discovered that even in paradise, the human condition persists. The weight of responsibility, the ache of solitude, the endless cycle of desire and disappointment, these shadows make the light moments more precious. Perhaps the true darkness of Animal Crossing isn't in its hidden mechanics or existential implications, but in how perfectly it mirrors our own world's beautiful, melancholic truth. That meaning comes not from perfection, but from our persistent, hopeful attempts to create connection in the face of inevitable loss. Sleep now, knowing that every digital sunset holds the promise of another dawn, another chance to tend the garden of impossible dreams. The town will wait for your return, patient and eternal, a monument to both human ambition and the gentle tragedy of never being quite enough.